Yosin and Wendy were in touch, and not going to be able to be here tonight. They may be listening in. They may hear it later. And I know Linda, I don't know if she's been listening in, but she moved away. Mm-hmm. But, so we are, as I was saying, we are few but mighty. And one of the things I want to say is, for me, I love teaching, and it's always, when there's a huge number of people, it's always kind of exciting, and when there's a small number of people, it's exciting too, because together we're touching whatever there is to be touched. So it's not, in Zen we often talk about the ways in which, like the Mahayana, the great vehicle, the Mahayana is not the great vehicle as opposed to the small vehicle. It's the great vehicle that is beyond large and small. And that way in which touching into the stuff that matters, it blows our notion of scale out of the water. It seems really important. And really important when we're talking about things like perfection. So for me, I'm using this in the context of, teaching, like when it's a small group versus when it's a large group. And what I've noticed over the years teaching the Dharma, sometimes to larger settings, sometimes there was a class that I taught a number of years ago where there was one person who showed up 1 week and it's like, okay, we're gonna go for it. But in that context, it's the same thing. It's like, it's not, we can't put it in a matter of scale, right? Because, well, why can't we put it in a matter of scale? Because that would imply that you either miss it or you get it. And the Buddha Dharma is not something that you either miss or you get. There's this very famous image that's all over kind of Zen of seeing the moon in a dewdrop, right? And the moon is a classic image for enlightenment, like the round, perfect moon, like the moon of Fusatsu, just the other night, right? The roundness of the full moon, and seeing the moon in a dewdrop. And enlightenment is like that. It's not like, either the moon is reflected in the giant ocean, it's also reflected in a dewdrop. Same moon, same completeness. This notion of scale is relevant to what the Paramitas are all about, right? So on Sundays when we chant the Heart Sutra in English, and the last line is kind of this English version of the Sanskrit version, right, of the mantra, Gate, Gate, Para, Gate, Parasam, Gate, Bodhisvaha. We chant that at the end of if you're here on Sundays, you've chanted that a bunch of times, right? So that para of Paragate, what that mantra is saying is gone beyond, gone completely beyond, enlightenment, woohoo! That's like the rough translation of what we're saying, especially like the enlightenment, woohoo! Bodhisvaha! But that para of Paragate, it's the same para of Paramita. Right? And it's a para that means beyond. So these perfections we've been studying, the sense of, these as ideals or traits or qualities or virtues, like that's a very Christian sounding word, virtues, but they are like patience, what we're studying today. That's actually a Christian virtue too, right? Patience is a virtue. I'm thinking of a Talking Head song. Patience is a virtue, but I don't have the time. But that notion of a virtue that is beyond, that is surpassing, right? Again, we're dealing with scale, because this isn't like, the perfection of wisdom is somehow like wisdom that's beyond, like it's big, as opposed to our little teeny wisdom, right? But yet there is something where we're grappling with these things that appear in our day-to-day lives, but aren't quite, they don't feel all the way there. So one of the ways, is this making sense so far? So one of the ways people think about this paramita is to think about the beyond is, these are qualities that we're describing from that beyond of crossing over to the other shore where we're like fully 100%, 1000% enlightened. So, from the standpoint of wisdom, we're describing what generosity is. From the standpoint of wisdom, that other side, the other shore, that having gone beyond, bodhisattva, right? We're describing what discipline is. From the standpoint of the other shore, we're describing what patience or forbearance, or the word that I'm going to introduce by the end of tonight, constancy. What patience or constancy is. From the standpoint of the other shore, next week, we're going to be talking about vigor or energy or zeal, or I'm not sure which word I like best for that. Maybe I'll figure that out by next week. And then lastly, from the standpoint of the other shore, we're talking about what concentration is. So that, and this is relevant too for the precepts, where you're thinking, well, what is the precept of not killing? It's a description of what, from the other shore of gate, paragate, enlightenment, woohoo, what we all know is life. It's the bodhisattva life from the standpoint of the other shore, which is from the standpoint of wisdom. Now, what I like drawing the Six Paramitas, where really wisdom is at the center in this way, is because instead of thinking, it's really valid, I think, to talk about it this way, as from the standpoint of the other shore, from the standpoint of wisdom, what the paramitas are showing us is what it is to live from that standpoint, what it is to live a life that's generous, disciplined, patient, vigorous, concentrated. But I like drawing it this way because it feels to me that as we bumble through in our dewdrops of enlightenment, we're actually kind of circumambulating this central thing. It's not that there's this other shore out there, like, sometimes Buddhism thinks about this sort of thing in terms of the kind of koans or puzzles of time, like kalpas and kalpas and kalpas away from now, when we are all the Buddhas that we all already are, when we've fully arrived. And sometimes we think about it in terms of distance, like the other shore over there somewhere infinitely far away. But instead of thinking of this as some place or time that we have to get to, I like to think of it as it's right here, but we're walking around it. This mysterious and yet totally vibrant heart of wisdom. We're circumambulating it. We're bumbling our way in our dewdrops, trying to be generous, trying to be disciplined, trying to be patient, trying to be vigorous, trying to have concentrated lives, concentrated minds, and kind of circling around something that we can't quite pin down. And because I'm a sentimental fool, I actually think the name for this thing we're circling is not so complicated. I just think this is love. I just think this is love. This is the heart of love. So, I'm wondering, just before we dive into more specifics about the paramita for today, Kshanti, and how it fits into what we've been talking about. I've been pointing to this thing as if this is like self-explanatory. Now we know it's a scroll on the screen. But what do we understand by love? What is that thing that's? And am I just being a sentimental fool to say it's all kind of about love? I don't know. Maybe I'm just a goofball who's watched too many Frank Capra movies or something. What's at the heart of it for you guys in your practice? Maybe love isn't a word that resonates, but
I think for me, I think that the word fits. because I think it encompasses things like being unconditional, and I think that's what love ultimately is. Right?
What do you mean by unconditional love?
Like, I think when we look at relationships, if we're talking like specifically about the people that are in our lives, I think the common thing of love is like what we think that they can like do for us, right? But that's not that's condition. It's a condition. They're doing something for you, and that's why you're giving them your attention. But if it's without a condition, it's like you love them because you love watching them develop into someone that person that they're like destined to become. And for me, that's like really cool to see, like with my nephew, with my wife, with my sister, just being part of their journey and having that like relationship is like, I guess, what it feels like for me. And that's like, I don't want anything from them. I just want to be around while they come through these like really cool discoveries in their life. That's what I would want. And I'm not perfect at that. Right. Yeah.
So there's kind of like, I want you to be complete as you are meant to be. I want your flourishing to.
Yeah.
Beautiful.
Maybe that's also a condition, but well, the idea is there, right? Like I don't, it's like it's that idea is that you just love them for them.
Yeah. They are not a means to anything you are not trying to accomplish. There's not an agenda here. This is not transactional.
Right.
Yeah. Okay.
That idea of means and ends. I'm reading this, you can't help but think of Khan. That idea. You don't use someone as a means. It's always treat them as an end. So, a lot of this is very Kantian, and a lot of these moral issues are always framed between this tension between utilitarianism and there's virtue ethics.
Yeah. And I would take that into, because I know what you're talking about, but others might not, but I would just take that into, if we're assuming that there's a stable and separate and enduring self, then the world is instrumentally here for me to maybe to enjoy. I mean, I may not be using it in the sense of trying to do something with it. I may just be enjoying it. That was a really good slice of pizza. But it is that kind of relationship, which is transactional because I think that I'm separate from this over here, that sense of separation. So, for me, love is the kind of the fuzzy, warm term for, interdependence, or in a kind of slightly more intense Zen-y terminology, emptiness. The idea that, there isn't some separate, stable, enduring, all complete in itself Myobun that is here, that everything that is Myobun is completely ventilated and open and interpenetrated by everything else, so that Myobun-ness is profoundly empty of its Myobun-nissiness. That did not make sense, but I think maybe it made a little sense. Yeah, what's at the center of it for you, Dylan, or for you, Emma? Of the center of practice.
Yeah, no, I agree. I don't know, one thing that kept coming to me was everything, and for that matter, anybody or everybody that we love, has the capability of destroying us. So, like a lot of people say they love the sun, but really what they're saying, what the condition is that that sun stays at the distance it's at right now, because I won't love the sun if I'm thrown into it. So, I don't know. I think that, yeah, it's definitely like, you know, you're saying about unconditional. And I think that has to do with identifying ultimately. It's that like identification with everything. Like I'm not separate from, even if I am destroyed by that object or person or whatever that I love. It's it's okay.
And what's weird is that, you know, we know love through these relationships with others. And even in something where I say I love the sun, where it's like, it's really good those 93 million miles or whatever it is are there because, you know, the burning hydrogen fusion fission thing, that would not be so great. But we know love through these relationships, right? And yet, as we're describing, if the love were about whatever we think a relationship is in that kind of transactional setting, it wouldn't be the thing that we're touching upon when we say, oh, this is love. Like the direct, like knowing love as love, like that, you can't actually do that, right? We know it through our relationships, and yet we say, oh, and our eyes get all starry and misty. This is love. But we know it because of this specific person that we love, or the specific animal that we love, or the specific experience that we love. And Emma, were you gonna?
What you're saying right now, it's almost like there is a conditionality to love. Maybe not in the sense that we think about it. But if you're talking about love is through our relationships and these 5 words. And these are specific moments of invitation into love, or specific facets through which we can see that are and also the opportunities through which we see that it's these become the condition which enable us to position ourselves, or invite us to position ourselves to be in a deeper, closer engagement with love, which is already there, but we sort of need this. Like you said, you know, like love, abstract within a relationship doesn't exist.
What is that?
Yeah.
And you know, love isn't a word that really is in kind of the Buddhist lexicon, right? And this is, I mean, when Buddhism enters cultures, it enters into the mythos and the imagery and the language of that culture. And so love is a word that is really resonant within Judeo-Christian, you know, the Abrahamic faiths, but it's not so much in Buddhism. In Buddhism, we tend to think of like there's wisdom and there's compassion. They're the 2 wings of enlightenment, and love sort of, maybe that's compassion. But no, I would say actually we are talking about wisdom. The heart of wisdom is the awakened, gentle heart of love. Right? In action, it looks like compassion. So, you know, as we've circumambulated, because we can't quite get to it, right? But as we circumambulate, one of the things that, and the stories are helping us do that, but we can do that in our own practice as we think, well, what does it mean for me to really bring vigor to my life? What does it mean for me to really have that one pointed concentration of samadhi, of what happens when I'm sitting on the cushion? I drop off body and mind, as our ancestor Dogen would say. We can experience it day by day. The stories are pointing us to it too. We are uncovering the ways in which this isn't just about my relationship with others. This is fundamentally about uncovering my own wise and awakened heart, my own heart of love. So let's, if we think back to the story of the hungry tigress, the starving tigress, how did that story of giving, or how does just thinking about giving per se in our lives, like, when was the last time you gave a gift that you thought, this is a real gift? What did that feel like? What did you encounter in your heart about yourself in that moment? And maybe that's raising the bar too high. When was the last time you gave a real gift? But just when was the last time you gave a gift where you're like, this, I am giving something here? Or when you've received a gift. Anyone? Micah, you look like you have a thought.
I just don't know if it's the right term that what you're looking for.
Oh, no. There's no right or wrong. Come on.
So this was about a decade ago. I had just come back from Korea, and I was living with my stepmom. And I was working in a call center in Central Oregon. It was probably one of the more difficult jobs I've had.
Imagine.
You can imagine the types of conversations you have 8 hours a day. And I came home and I was just really upset. Just like, I'm college educated. This is above me. Why am I having to do this type of work? And my stepmom looked at me and was like, "What are you talking about? This is work. Everybody has to do it. It doesn't matter what your level of education is. It doesn't matter. Just go in there, do the best you can, and come home. And this won't be forever. You can change it eventually. But I think that you need to stop thinking of things being above or below you, because that's not true." And that was like, it's 10 years, and I still think about that.
So this is one of the things that Dogen quote that I put on a couple of handouts, where he says, he basically says, it's all we do jobs, we build bridges, we, dig in the soil. This is giving. This is all giving and receiving, bringing our energy into the world.
Right.
So why is that a moment that still resonates for you? What did you learn there?
It was really humbling to just be like, I guess it's like a lot of pressure on myself to be successful. I have three college degrees and a master's degree. Like I've really gone through the education gambit. But it also just kind of helped me put into perspective that if there's a day that I need to get by, or I'm supporting someone and I'm doing something like janitorial work, which is considered lowly in our culture, there's nothing wrong with it, and it's fine, and you still just put the same effort and energy that you would into working with sea turtles, and it's still the same thing. You can still get the same benefits from it.
Yeah.
And
it's still the same thing. It's still,
well, like I it helps me, like, well, I feel like maybe I used to look down on people for doing that kind of work, like that. It's pretty, yeah.
Because you thought of the labor of your hands as something, or of your mind as yours.
Right.
That you own this.
Mm-hmm.
And you are giving it to the world, and the world is going to return you, give you the propers that you. I remember for me a moment that was really, really important in my life was, and I've probably talked about it in this hall before, because it was one of those moments that you bring up in Dharma talks and things, but it was my first moment as a chaplain intern, when they were just going to the way it works when you're training to be a chaplain is you go to chaplain-y classes and you talk about stuff, but then you just, okay, now go see patients. And you're like, huh? Wait, no, just go. And so it was the first morning where we were going to all start seeing patients, just plunge into their rooms. I'm thinking, holy cow, I'm screwed. They're screwed. And then there was this, have I talked about this with you guys before?
Mm-hmm.
Then there was this shift of heart where it's like, oh, wait, of course I don't know what I'm doing. And if this were all about Myobun and her abilities, we'd all be sunk, because these people are they've got cancer diagnoses and they're dying, or they've just in their heart. This is I'm not qualified to do this. So if this were about me, even if I somehow had some whatever, I don't know, if I possess something, we'd all be sunk, because how am I going to meet them? This is not about me. I am totally unprepared to do this. Right. And that's like the moon in a dewdrop. It's not like, oh, I'm a little unprepared or I'm a lot unprepared. It's like I'm absolutely unprepared for meeting this moment, because it's not me and it's not them. It's this moment unfolding in life, in a human life, and I'm going to meet it totally. And I can only do that because actually I'm totally unqualified. I mean, within reason. Like, I do have some training now. I did get some training. I'm not a terrible chaplain, I think, but it's not about that. So yeah, there's something there where it's like, this is not mine. And that's why I think when Dogen says about generosity, although nothing is mine to give, that doesn't prevent me from giving. Because there's still whatever it is to show up and make the offering. Like, that actually has to happen. That the human body has to make that movement forward. Other things we've learned from moments of giving or receiving. Have you ever given a good gift? Or received a good gift?
Yeah, I mean, the greatest gifts I've been given were through, just like things that people have told me oftentimes, like random people at random times in my life when I wasn't expecting to hear something that I was going to hear. And like, I don't know, it's funny, the things that stick with you over time. Like, it could just been like a random person you pass in the street and they says like one sentence to you that just like keeps coming back, So I think in terms of receiving gifts, I can't think, there's a lot of witnesses, but come up with a specific one right now,
No, and I'm totally putting you on the spot.
Yeah.
But that's beautiful, right? Like, there's something about, when we receive a gift that we're not expecting, or when someone like gives us something, it's like, how did they know? This moment of really being touched by someone, where it isn't, somehow it's like, what is that? It's like really being met, right? Really being met in our innermost core. And there's something about giving a gift where when you really nail it, like when you give a good gift to someone, whatever it is, whether it's tangible or intangible, whether it's a sentence or whether it's a thing, when you really do it, it's like there's something about really meeting this moment in a way that we can't do when it's transactional. And I think about the story of the starving tigress and the way in which, it's not just that the bodhisattva gives her food. It's that the bodhisattva sees her heart, right? Like this being, this tiger, if she eats her young, the karma will be unbearable. And so he meets, just like, in the Sagaki ceremony, like, these may be hungry ghosts, they may be demons, but we're going to feed them, right? Because they are Buddhas. So it's that kind of encounter at the level of the heart, which when it touches us, because it's like, it's not just my heart. It's like, I'm seeing in you, you're seeing in me, the total perfection of being. Right? Really meeting the moment. So how did that play out with Gentle Heart, the aptly named wonderful queen last week? Ooh. The bodhisattva is the horny monk. I mean, he like sees the naked. I was just rereading the story of David and Bathsheba because, the sort of the biblical version of the story is actually goes in weird places, but it kind of ends up in the same place because this is taking us too far afield, but Bathsheba ends up giving birth to Solomon, who is like wisdom, one of the figures of wisdom personified in the Bible. Anyway, but in the story, in the Janaka tales, the Buddhist version of this story, so he sees he's inflamed with lust, and gentle heart kind of strings him along and holds him steady. Like, how is that about circumambulating the wise heart? What is discipline? What is it that we're doing when we're like holding ourselves steady in the middle of our whatever? What are we doing?
What you're saying about generosity was reminding me of how I just spoke during Wasagaki about its verses.
Yeah.
He says something along the lines of generosity fundamentally is just not acknowledgement, just seeing.
Yes.
Like fundamentally, it is just encountering. And I wonder about discipline too. And now the wheel's turning, and I'm wondering about all five of them.
Yeah.
But fundamentally,
Right.
discipline
Right.
in the story of gentle
Right.
heart is just seeing
Right.
the situation.
Yeah. So, like, we think, well, we talked a little bit about this last week. We think about discipline. What I think about discipline is, get off your butt, do this thing, have, sort of mind over matter, willpower, right? We think that in discipline we're, I don't know, like, what do we think? Like, if for those who wake up at 4:30 in the morning now, like, what is that, Emma?
This is the good thing to do, and you should do it because it'll be the good density that you
Yeah.
just work harder, and it doesn't matter that your feet are cold. Like,
Right.
don't wear a jacket.
Yeah. Okay.
That's discipline.
Right. Okay. And so let's play that out. So, okay. So don't wear a jacket. Don't wear socks. Your feet, actually, it's better if they're cold, probably. Like, how are you encountering yourself in those moments?
I don't know how to bring it back cleanly to what you're sharing and saying, and I want to, but
Just bring it wherever.
okay. The way that I've been speaking to that version of myself, I've been imagining him as a dragon and speaking with them. At their core, they really care. They want to take care. Both they want to take care of the way people perceive me, like they want.
Wait, who's the they here?
Yeah, this gets confusing and messy.
Is this the dragon?
Yeah.
It's okay. Keep going.
Like for their ferociously protected.
Yeah.
But use the tools of just like don't have a really full toolbox to use to like enact that protection and enact that care. So they see something and they want it. I don't know what it is that I want, but there's something here that I feel fervently drawn towards. And that part of me that wants that can burn really hot. Sometimes it really scar what it touches. But in speaking to them and just like realizing that they care about that, it kind of helps. Like I'll hit the bell wrong. The other day I dropped the stick that hits the bowl. I was hitting the bowl and I dropped it. It was because I was like, if you hold it looser, it sounds better. And I was holding it way too loose. And it was during Zazen and everything was very quiet. You just have a voice as it comes out. It's just suck. we're just always sitting next to you. Almost for the worst and practitioner that's ever considered. But respond with that. Oh, I really like it and that sounds good. That didn't sound so good. How can we get better next time? Well, you're holding your and laughing a little.
Yeah, we talked about that shame thing that comes up
Yeah.
with forms in the discipline last week, you know. I mean, you know, it's so within, I'm gonna read a little quote from a Theravada practitioner. I don't even know who this guy is. This is off the interwebs. Some Theravada practitioner named Theramit. So, you know, when we were talking about like the 12 links of dependent origination, in the way in which, you know, like that wheel of suffering just keeps turning. Life keeps doing life, right? You know, the dragons don't know. They don't really. They're bumbling through in their dewdrops, to mix many metaphors here. You know, and life just keeps doing life, and we keep, you know, that irony that I've talked about a bunch of times, where, you know, although everything is always changing and impermanence is like the root cause of suffering, yet the irony is nothing ever really changes. We just keep running in the same rut over and over and over again. So this person on the internet, Tiramit, is talking about, like, well, how do we break the cycle? And if you remember, you may not remember, but it's in one of the handouts, you know, as we imagine that movement from one moment of existence to the next, either like thinking about this on the psychological plane of how Myobun recreates her Myobunness moment by moment. Even though I'm empty, I still somehow keeping myself as if I am enduring, and then I keep enduring suffering as a consequence. So that step-by-step way in which moment by moment, lifetime by lifetime, epoch by epoch, kalpa by kalpa, I keep recreating things, or not just I, but we, all of us, the whole shebang, keep recreating things. There's that evolution from our predilections, the way, you know, I like things or I don't like things, to that stickiness of desire. Does this ring bells, right? So from what the Sanskrit word vedana, that feeling tone, it's like either it's positive or it's negative or it's neutral, but even neutral is typically usually negative. Like, we don't like things that are neutral, really. We want it to either burn hot or be really cold, like, right? So yes, no, swipe right, swipe left, whatever, right? And that moves then, so you have a little predilection, and then that moves to like the stickiness of desire. So this guy Termit says, the way to deal with tanha, that stickiness of clinging desire, right, which is where things are problematic, because once we've got that stickiness, then we're really on the hook, right, is to cut off the conditions that lead to its arising. At the Vedana stage, there are three possibilities: the arising of pleasure or pain or neutral feelings. If feelings of pleasure or pain arise, then craving or aversion, tanha, that stickiness, will follow. Tanha will be the result, right? We will go from craving to grasping, sticky. So he's saying, like, you know, what we really want is to have things be neutral. And that's a very standard way to think about what discipline should be about, is making us have equanimous minds, you know, that even keel where I don't care, it's neither good nor bad, I'm okay with it. And people try to cultivate that all the time. It's like, well, I'm not going to eat the food that I really like, and I'm not going to eat the food I don't like. I'm just going to eat really bland oatmeal, and I'm not going to put anything on my oatmeal. I'm going to be really good, which means I'm going to be really equanimous. I will have neither pleasure nor pain. Yeah, that's not the middle path, right? Because what ends up happening is, as we try to go like neither pleasure nor pain, we just bring the ends in. So it's like, this is the good plain oatmeal, as opposed to the bad plain oatmeal, right? So we've talked about that before. But then, so discipline, right? That ends up being about that movement, and rather than trying to cut off pleasure and unpleasure, it's like, can we hold steady in the experience of liking and not liking, And oh my God, even more radical, can we hold steady in the stickiness of clinging? And that's what that story does. Gentle heart just keeps the bodhisattva in that place of like, she holds him. And she holds him there until there's the point where she can say, who are you? Don't you remember? You know, so you wake up at 4:30 again and again and again and again. And it's not that your feet stop being cold, but over time, something else unfolds. You look like, Michael, it looked like this resonated for you.
Oh yeah, totally.
Yeah.
I've done a couple of 10-day retreats where you start at 4:30. Man, I don't know. Like I guess you're probably practicing every day since you're residing here but yeah. When like I guess when I did it, it was like the first time I did the 10 days, it was like this constant source of aversion of just feeling totally uncomfortable in my skin, like being stuck and like having to come up, you know, all these crazy memories that you've long since forgotten come back to your eyes, and it's very painful, and it's an emotional roller coaster of ups and downs. And the second 10 days were equally that much, but it was like it just started to become like, well, okay, this really hurts to sit in this position, but what if I don't move? You know, what if I just sit with that pain and I just continue going through the sensations of my body and just start to feel it at its core for what it really is. And like, yeah. And like that just like really hit. And I was like, oh my gosh, I'm prescribing it the definition of pain. You know, it's not that at all. Right? Yeah.
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 So again, like somehow an encounter happens, right? Something that's like, oh, intimacy with this experience, with this moment. And with this heart, because, you know, as you're saying, like there's something that you want. But what is it? What does, you know, when the bodhisattva wants gentle heart, what does he want, really? He doesn't. I mean, you know, what is that burning of sexual desire? What is that about? He wants intimacy, which he actually has already, because in the story he's living, you know, in the castle of the king and queen who adore him and admire him and are learning from him. He has that intimacy. And she sees him and he sees her, which is, you know, I mean, that's about as intimate as you would ever want a sexual act to be. So there's something where it's like, okay, this is what I wanted. The discipline is what helped me find it. Right? The discipline is what helped me find myself. But so many shadows here, like the shame of, oh my God, I just dropped it, right? And so we keep circumambulating. We keep trying. And, you know, as a, whatever, 20-some years of Zen practice, I will tell you for me, this is the hard one, because it brings up discipline. It's the hard one because it brings up all the ways in which we kind of want to crush ourselves in the world. In order to get what we want, we were willing to destroy everything. And so we keep circumambulating. And this is actually where patience comes in. So I want to talk about patience. I have a handout, of course. I think I should have one. Oh, I know I made enough handout. Yes, I did. Okay, there we go. So these cartoons at the top. There's actually, this is a internet comic strip of me, and Eunice, as in me, and Eunice. Like, I mean, the name is Eunice, but there's a joke here. Eunice. Yeah, so me, and Eunice. Anyway, so these are two cartoons from Nina Paley, who's the artist behind that. God grant me patience. hurry up. And then slow down now, hurry up and slow down. They sort of resonated for me, but I especially like her comment on them, which is the secret of patience is doing something else in the meantime. Nice. Okay, let's talk about patience. So, Kashanti, patience. I think you, in the talking about the Vipassana retreats, it's like we all, in the practice of meditation, we are really working the paramita of patience, right? Because, it's like sit still. It's that holding steady. And so what is it? What is patience? What resonates for you in the idea of patience? Yeah, staying there. Yeah.
Acceptance.
Yeah, acceptance.
Faith.
Faith. Ooh, say more.
Faith that you, like, whatever it is that you're waiting for or getting through, faith that you'll get through it and that everything will work out, I guess.
Yeah, beautiful. Yeah, I mean, there's this thing about patience that seems like the way it works is that we are waiting. So there's a kind of, we're waiting for something. Or we're waiting, it's like it's not, I mean, and it's really kind of gross version. I mean, I don't mean gross like yucky, I mean gross like macro, big. It's like sitting zazen and waiting, knowing that the bell will ring. Emma will eventually ring the bell. She will. It's been 100,000 years, but it will ring eventually, right? So there's a kind of, and that I think is what's so funny with Nina Paley saying the secret of patience is doing something else in the meantime. That kind of like my first 10-day retreat, I had, first of all, I didn't know, this was before I became a Zen Buddhist, was my exposure to Buddhism was to go on a 10-day retreat.
Oh boy.
Yeah. And I didn't read, like, this is total Myobun style. I just didn't read the fine print. Like, I didn't know what the schedule was.
Oh, no.
I was going to, because it's like, oh, I can afford it, because you could pay what you,
Yes.
yeah. So I'm
Definitely.
like, this is a cheap way to
I
get a
could afford
retreat.
it. Yeah.
So I went, and I was like, we're going to be literally sitting for 10 hours. That's all we're doing. And they won't feed me anything really afternoon. I mean, it turns out I got to eat something afternoon. And so what I did for 10 days was I thought of all of the films starring Keanu Reeves. And I remembered all of the narratives of and I wrote the book in my head. That was because I was a professor at the time. So I was like, I could write a really good book about Keanu Reeves, and it will be called Keanu Reeves is God. And it will start with his role as Neo, and then it'll go into like little Buddha, and yeah.
That's totally what happens though.
Yeah, you're just like, I will pass this time.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Is that patience? No, that says no. You're telling me I was bad.
You did it. You sat through it.
A face of patience. But I would reckon to say that sort of distraction is actually an expression of impatience with the current moment, with the current happening of experience. I wonder if that's what you were slowly pointing to.
Well, I don't know. I don't know. What do you think, Andy?
I kind of agree with Emma.
Yeah.
And don't think that patience is doing something else. First thing that comes to mind is get your phone out while you're waiting in line.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so
that's not patience.
So
distraction.
So patience is waiting. Okay. Right? Does that seem right that there's an element of no?
I feel nervous about my conviction.
No,
and ready
this is
to be
awesome.
Totally
We got to circumambulate.
walk in circles. but even like the notion of waiting implies that there is something now and there's something later, and what is something now will change. And kind of like you're saying, it's like everything changes, but also like nothing ever changes.
Right.
So I wonder if patience is like sort of our exact opposite of that, like conventional idea of waiting, that it's like Oho-san has talked about how to he recently talked about how to enter into the space of a ritual and position yourself to really receive the medicine of that ritual. He's talking about Osekaku around Halloween weekend. And he's talking about, when you enter in that ritual, you have no mind for when it ends and when it begins. Don't think about when it'll end. Don't think about how annoying this, just, or actually maybe you can think about how annoying this chant is, but don't think about that in the context of like ending. So you're not waiting for anything.
Okay.
Is that it?
Yeah.
It's like once the concept of waiting comes into your mind, you're automatically being impatient
Because you want it to be over.
because there's something
Yeah.
that you're
Yeah.
reaching for.
Yeah. So once the concept of waiting. So the word patient in English comes from the Latin word patio, which means to suffer or to endure or to tolerate. Okay? So, God grant me patience, like that first frame here. There is something, it's interesting, of all of these, the word, it is something that we think of as like, it is a thing that I have, right? Like I have patience, right? God grant me, like why do we say that? Why is that God grant me? What does that even mean? God grant me patience. Why do people say that? What are they saying when they say that?
Something has, in this instance, doesn't look like something's really particularly bothering this individual, but maybe something has gotten to them, something
Yes.
that's like, and so they're looking to,
How do I?
how
How
can
do I live with this?
right,
Right? How do I accept it? You used the word
Yeah.
acceptance before.
Yeah.
How do I accept it?
Mhm.
How do I live with it? And one of the ways we live with it is we think about all the Keanu Reeves movies, right? I mean, we grin and bear it. We endure it really skillfully, unskillfully, messily, sloppily. We sit through in like ridiculously long ceremony, which at Buddha we don't have ridiculously long ceremonies very often, but there have been. Like when we dedicated the temple in 2004, there were these Japanese it was like, this is like a long time, as I recall. Of course, I was pretty new in my Zen practice at that point. It's like, and you're like this, the whole time. So we get through it, it's messy. So why do we want to endure things? Like, why does that even happen?
I mean, like, I think something brought you to that 10-day retreat, right?
Yeah.
Something if whether we're seeking answers or maybe we don't know why we, the reason that got me into Buddhism is I had lost my mother. So I was trying to understand what that meant to, suddenly become an orphan in that sense of the word. And so for me, it was like, that's why I want answers as to why this, like, what is life and why do we go through these experiences and what does that mean for us? And so like, I went in getting answers, and then during the retreat, there were these really silly moments where I was like making Dungeons and Dragons scenarios in my head.
Yes, yes, brother, I hear you, brother.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then something happens while we're waiting.
Right.
While we're waiting for it to end, something maybe shifts, maybe some doorway opens. Now, what's interesting about the story, I don't know if you guys read The Blue Bear, is not what you would necessarily first and foremost expect as a story about patience. The story is, there's this magical, incredible bear whose very flesh can confer like immortality, and everybody wants to hunt him down. and this hunter, and the bear is the bodhisattva, the bear is the Buddha in this story, as opposed to the story of the bodhisattva and the tiger, where the tiger is not the bodhisattva. In this one, he's the bear. And a hunter is looking for him to trap him, to bring him for all the wealth that he will get by selling the meat. And I don't know, is it helpful for me to tell the story? Okay. And I'll just give the bare bones of the story about the blue bear. I know it's really stupid. So there's a horrible storm, and the hunter is like lost, and he's going to die. And the bear hears this man screaming in the wilderness and goes and saves him. It's a magical bear, right? Takes him back to his den and nurses him back to life. And when the guy wakes up, he's terrified. And the bear says, "Oh no, don't be afraid. You can stay here as long as you want. The only thing I ask for in return is that you don't tell anyone where my den is. You keep the secret." And the guy's like, "Yeah." And he stays there, recovers. Like the storm passes. He goes down the mountain. Actually, going down the mountain, he starts to think, it's like, he's just a bear. Like, why should I keep my promise to him? It's a bear, and if I actually do turn him in, reveal where his den is, I'll have all this money, and think about all the good I could do with that money. I could feed all the calculus, all the utilitarian arguments, right? Anyway, so he gets down to the kingdom. He tells the king where the bear is. They go, they find the bear, they capture the bear. The bear says, before they, put a muzzle on him, the bear says, wait, I can talk, and I'm going to tell you a story. This guy, I saved his life, and now he's given me up. And the king, when the king hears this, the king is just outraged. He's like, go get that hunter. That's what he did is so ignoble. This bear is more noble than a human. This bear is beautiful and incredible, and will set the bear free. And so they bring the hunter, and they're about to punish him, and the bear says, no, don't punish him. Let him go. It says, he says, Your Majesty, I saved a hunter from death. He and he alone knew where the den lay. I trusted him and put my safety in his hands. Yet it is now clear to me, for the sake of your gold, he has broken his word and betrayed me. Even a beast knows better. And the king is blown away. The bear says, he says, kindness is greater than cruelty. Do not strike back, but develop the fortitude of patience. So he says, don't punish the hunter. Let him go. Let him go. If you practice these virtues diligently, you will find life without limit. And in this way, the bear is revealing. He's like, look, my flesh really will confer endless life, but it's not my flesh, like literally, it's the wisdom I have about patience, about kindness, about decency. Anyway, the hunter is outraged that the bear is being let go. He says, he's just a bear. The king's like, watch it, and ultimately kicks the hunter out of the kingdom. The hunter is furious, enraged, so aggrieved that not only did the bear get away, but that the king let him get away, and the king didn't give him the reward, didn't give him any money, and now he's hunting for roots and berries because he doesn't even have any weapons anymore, and he's furious. And then decades later, the hunter is still in the forest, and he sees his own reflection in the water, and he says, the angry hunter stormed off into the forest. He hunted animals and ate wild berries and roots. One day, as he bent to a stream, he caught his own reflection in the water. With his dark beard and eyes reddened from the smoke of campfires, his face staring back up at him looked familiar. Why, he thought, I look like a bear. All at once the truth of what he'd done hit him, and he exclaimed, what a fool I was. What matter if it was a beast? It saved my life and deserved better. And he threw away his bow and spear and became a hermit, and ultimately lived many kalpas later, became a Buddha, basically. Right? So it's not exactly the story of patience we would expect. Right? What is the patience that the bear is demonstrating? in all of this. It's
The
like,
patience and that the hunter will learn his lesson
Mm.
eventually.
yeah,
That,
yeah.
you know,
Yeah, I mean, that seems really important in the tale, is that it's like, in a world where we all are awakened over the course of time, over the kalpas and kalpas and kalpas, we all are all Buddhas. So then what does this mean for the bear when he's been betrayed? It's like he's in a position to get some revenge on this. I mean, going back even further, the bear knows that the hunter is there to hunt him, saves his life. And then it's like, King, he's not such a nice guy, but let him go. Patience. So this is like the patience of the Gospels. I mean, this is one of the paramitas that seems very similar to teachings like, Sermon on the Mount. So this is, your handout, I have the quote, the famous quote. But I say unto you that you resist not evil, but whoever shall smite thee on thy right cheek, turn to him the other also. And if any man will sue thee at the law and take away thy coat, let him have thy cloak also. So this is the patience, the forbearance that says, don't seek revenge. Don't see, this is not about getting what you have coming to you. Whether you're the hunter who says, I had that money coming to me because I found the bear, or you're the bear saying, he betrayed me. Let's have some justice. This isn't going to be about that. This is going to be about forbearance. And that is something that is taught over and over again within Buddhism, that, don't express anger at your enemies. A true life story of this would be, there's a Tibetan monk, Paden Gyatso, who he died, I think, about 5 years ago. He was imprisoned by the Chinese for 33 years, tortured. He expressed the fortitude of patience in two ways. Because on the one hand, he wouldn't say that, he wouldn't forswear his Buddhism. He wouldn't say that Tibet was really China. And so he wouldn't renounce that, and so he was tortured. But then he also talks about, this is a quote of his, he says, it is not that I was without hatred for my captives, especially when I was being tortured by my guards. It's not on your sheets. Especially when I was being tortured by my guards, I had immense hatred against them because I was being hurt. But as a religious person, after the event, I could reflect on what had happened, and I could see that those who inflicted torture did so out of their own ignorance. As a religious person, I have to sit back and ask myself, what is all this? Buddhist teachings say, don't let your calm be disturbed, and do not respond to anger with anger. What do you guys think about that?
I mean, the first thing that came to mind to me was Gandhi,
Yeah.
Martin King, and violence.
Yeah.
And then my mind goes to, the how revenge, but retribution
Yeah.
in our legal system defines
Perfectly
a
legitimate.
legitimate
Yeah.
right part of the law, which
Right.
speaks to that animal nature, for
Yeah.
lack of a better term, which
Yeah.
isn't your
Yeah.
lizard brain reacting
No, I mean,
But
where you went is exactly, yeah.
yeah, but this patience is sort of, taking a step back from that and saying this, I mean, there's lots of ways you can say it. Gandhi, I think, said it by an eye for an eye makes the whole world blind, but
Yeah, and
it's about looking at everyone as a human being, even if they're doing evil to you, like, torturing you. Everyone is a human being, and treat them with respect.
Well, and this, this goes back to what Dylan was saying, like over time, we all get there.
Right.
And this is where I went too, was in Martin Luther King. This phrase of his that gets quoted, he said it many times, but so this is in your handout. So these are excerpts from a speech that he gave at Oberlin College, their commencement speech in 1965, right before the Voting Rights Act was just about to be enacted. And that phrase of his, which he said in many different speeches, but that I'm going to butcher it. The arc of the moral arc of the universe is long. Where is it? I have too many quotes here. Well, that the arc of the moral universe is long, but it bends towards justice. But I'm butchering it. Anyway, in this speech, he talks about it. And there are a number of places in this speech that are really poignant, given where we are in today's, literally on election day. What I want to look at here is the second quote. This is where we get into that idea of violence and nonviolence. It says, there's another problem facing us that we must deal with if we are to remain awake through a social revolution. He talks about the revolution that was happening in the mid-60s, right? The civil rights moment. We must get rid of violence, hatred, and war. Anyone who feels that the problems of mankind can be solved through violence is sleeping through a revolution. I've said this over and over again, and I believe it more than ever today. We know about violence. It's been the inseparable twin of Western materialism, the hallmark of its grandeur. I'm convinced that violence ends up creating many more social problems than it solves. That's why I say to people that if we could succumb to the temptation of using violence in our struggle, unborn generations will be the recipients of a long and desolate night of bitterness. There is another way, a way as old as the insights of Jesus of Nazareth and as modern as the techniques of Mohandas K. Gandhi. For it is possible to stand up against an unjust system with all your might, with all your body, with all your soul, and yet not stoop to hatred and violence. Okay, so here's my question. Is that possible? Is that that would be one way to define Kshanti, is to say Kshanti is to be firm without hatred. Like, let's not, okay, yes, no violence, but I mean without hatred, without saying no, without pushing away. Hatred in the sense of what's at the circle of samsara, greed, hatred, and delusion. Hatred is what says, I reject this part of the world. Is it possible to stand up against injustice without hatred? Or if it is, how is it possible? Does that question make sense?
Yes.
Yes? Was that a question? Yes?
I mean, I think it's possible, sure.
Okay.
Because, I mean, it's on your board. It's in the center of your board. I think, like,
Okay, but if I say this is wrong, no, how do I do that without pushing it? How do we
You can-
meet? And think about this like literally now, the moment we're at
Yeah.
now. How do we meet this moment with patience?
You can tell people no lovingly. You can still be firm. It's like it's setting a boundary, right?
Okay.
And you could even be aggressive, but like at the core, it's because that person is a Buddha. I mean, that's kind of the point of the story, right?
Right.
Like, and so maybe that's like, obviously there's a certain element of tact that comes into it, but maybe aggression is what that person understands. Maybe that's what the response is, and the intention is it to do it to help that person. You know, and I think if your intention is there, then you won't do it with hatred. You won't be responding because you want to punch them in the mouth, right? You're doing it to show them something. And I don't think it happens. I don't think it happens that way. I think we're human. Like, we're gonna get riled up,
Yeah.
you know. But
Yeah.
sometimes, yeah.
We're gonna get riled up.
Yeah.
Well, none of these is alone,
Right.
right? We're circumambulating. We need all five of them to perfect wisdom, to encounter the awakened heart. But this is a real, and the fourth quote is comes to the question of waiting. So one of the things that Rafe Martin says, oh shoot, we're at time. Well, I'll just say this. One of the things Rafe Martin says is, you know, there's this, because we have within Buddhism the clarity of we all awakened at one time together with the Buddha. It plays out over kalpas. There is a way that this can work that feels like, you know, eventually the hunter is going to realize that he is a Buddha too. So let's just wait it out. And one of the things that MLK said was, you know, time is usually on the side of the bad guys. Like, they're better at waiting things out. So we're not going to wait this out. But how do we stand firm? And this is where the word constancy comes up. And also this takes us back to the question of vow, right? If we're going to stand firm, we have to stand firm in something. Or the question, the term that Dylan brought up, faith. We got to hold firm in something. So what are we holding firm in? Where is our vow? Where is our faith? What are we holding in? And we're bodhisattvas, so we're probably trying to hold here at the center. Okay, we will come back to this next week, but I just really, it feels super important. This can be kind of abstract. This can be kind of, we can get caught up in stories and Sanskrit terms, but this is actually where we are right now in our society. We're right back in, you know, what does it mean to say, yeah, the arc of the moral universe is long, but it bends toward justice. Like, we're going to wait. How do we do this? Okay. Buddham saranam gacchami, Dhammam saranam gacchami, Sangham saranam gacchami, Dutiyampi Buddham Sampi Sangam Saranam Gacchami.